Hello, everyone. This is MC Deck Discussions, and I am Abby Small. And today we have another deck. This is a Silk deck, Injustice, and it is called Cindy's Silk Sense Surveillance Skills, and it has 43 cards in it. And let's go ahead and talk about this deck. So I want to start off by saying that this deck has a number of elements that build up a lot of control. The biggest issue for her, generally speaking, is usually in the very beginning of the game before she gets a chance to get some of her cards out. But this card has a ton of card draw opportunities, which make it relatively easy to get those out. A number of key cards, some of the key cards in the first pass through the deck, and then other cards in the second pass that fill this out. Maybe a third pass, and you start really attacking the villain once you get the right cards ready, which would be her attack cards, the swinging silk kick cards. All right, so let's go ahead and look at some of those elements of this deck. I'm going to start with the allies. This is a Web Warrior deck. Actually, I guess I'm starting here. So we have the Web of Life and Destiny, and the importance of this card, right, is that first of all, I should probably mention it's a 3-cost support, but it is free if you are a Web Warrior, and Silk is a Web Warrior. And then it has this response: after a Web Warrior ally leaves play, choose a player. That player draws 1 card. Note that you don't have to exhaust this. So if multiple Web Warriors leave play, you get to draw a card for each one of those. So the key cards that I'm going to point out in here, I'm not going to bother really with Moon Girl, other than saying that Silk has a genius trait on her alter ego side. So when she's on her alter ego side, she can play Moon Girl and have the potential to draw up to 3 cards when she does. And then we have more card draw from Nick Fury. Nick Fury Sr. and Nick Fury Sr. might also provide instead removing 3 threat from a scheme. Sometimes that's his most valuable play. And then we have Professor X to remove 3 threat and also provide some much needed confusing for the villain. And as long as I'm on that confusing, let's go over to Quick Quip. We have 1 copy of this. I started off with 2 copies, right? If you look at the deck refinements of this, as I play tested it, I eventually dropped one of the Quick Quips, found that 2 of them weren't really necessary, that just 1 was good enough. And the main reason for that being some of the cards we have in the upgrades. All right, so we'll get to the upgrades soon enough. Let's continue on with the allies. Oh, Quick Quip, by the way, is a 2-cost event. It does require that you have the mental resource icon to play it, but that shouldn't be a problem in this deck. We'll see why later on. And has this hero action: deal 1 damage to a Web Warrior character you control, and then place a total of 2 confused status cards on up to 2 enemies, which is really nice when you can put it on 2 enemies, but it's also very nice for when you're playing against a villain that has steady, because then you can put both confused status cards on that villain and still be able to confuse them. So that works out really nicely against, especially against a couple of the villains that we have in this deck. All right, so let's move on to the Web Warrior allies now. So when I do future decks on this, I'm not going to spend as much time on the Web Warrior allies in the ones that I've covered here. So this time I'll spend a little bit more time on them and their value to this deck and future decks as well. All right, because this one is the first, of my Silk deck discussions. This is the first one. So I'll spend a little more time on that. So we have Ghost Spider in here, 3-cost ally, 2 attack, 1 thwart, 3 health. And you can only play if you have a Web Warrior card, a control Web Warrior card. It has this interrupt: when Ghost Spider leaves play, search your deck for an identity-specific event and add it to your hand. So that can be valuable throughout the game, depending upon typically whether or not you want to get Smooth as Silk out. Excuse me, not that one. Although it could draw that one if these other ones are missing. So you might have Wall Crawl if you're wanting some threat removal, or you might try to use Swinging Silk Kick. This card is especially an important card that you're wanting to get, when you're looking to do your big attacks. All right, and especially at the end of the game. So Ghost Spider becomes a higher priority to me to play, right? We have, we could play any of these, right, at any time. So Ghost Spider tends to be a higher priority for me to play nearing that the end of the game. And then we also have Madam Web. who is valuable anytime. 3 cost card, 1 attack, 2 thwart. Has only 2 health, but her value is in her response. After Madam Web enters play, look at the top X cards of the encounter deck, where X is the number of Web Warrior cards you control. You may discard 1 card looked at this way and put the rest back in any order. So that's really awesome for controlling what's going to come out from the villain afterwards when it's the villain's turn. But also note that the Web of Life and Destiny is a Web Warrior card, so that counts. So that would be one of the cards. That'll be important when we get to our Spider-Man character down here as well. So we'll come to that soon enough. We also have Spider SBDR, the Penny Parker version, right? So we have play only if you control a Web Warrior card. When defeated, add Spider to your hand if she was defeated by taking excess consequential damage. So she only has, so she's a 2 cost, 1 attack, 2 thwart, but her 2 thwart has 2 consequential damage, and she has 2 health. So when she comes out the first right away, sometimes what you want to do is just attack with her with that 1 attack, and then she can go and attack the second time she activates. In the next round, if she stays around that long, then you can do a thwart of 2, and then she'll come back to your hand because she'll have excess consequential damage. But other times, you're just wanting to quickly use the 2 thwart right away, and then she'll leave play, and we'll get the card draw from Web of Life and Destiny. Then we have Spider-Man Peter Parker, who's really the MVP of all of the allies. So once Spider-Man comes into play, right? So the tough thing about playing him from your hand is he has this requirement that you have to use a physical, mental, and energy resource to play him. We'll see how we get around that in a little bit. But here's his value. He has this response. After Spider-Man attacks or thwarts, choose another Web Warrior character, ready that character, and typically you're going to ready Silk. So highly valuable for readying Silk, and Silk already is going to get some readying for one of her upgrades. So that being able to ready her twice is pretty awesome. And then now let's go ahead and get to our one Justice Web Warrior character. So this is Spider-Man, the Pavitra version, and is a Web Warrior, right? 1 attack, 1 thwart, 3 health, and has this response. After Spider-Man enters play, remove 1 threat from a scheme for each Web Warrior card you control, including this particular Spider-Man. So that can really add up to a lot. I have a tendency to play him a lot. Like when I'm choosing between, like I'll play him over Madam Web, Ghost Spider. Most of the time, I'll play him over a lot of these other Web Warriors because he comes in for that nice spike of threat removal. And then he has his, either 1 attack or 1 thwart to add to that. So I find him highly valuable in this deck. And then we have our Spider-Man Otto Octavius, who did not start off in the deck. So originally I didn't plan on adding Otto Octavius to the deck because if you look at all these upgrades over here, right? So she has her own upgrades of eidetic memory, organic webbing, outwit, spider claws, and reflexes. None of those are have a tech trait, right? So he has this response. After you play Spider-Man from your hand, ready an upgrade you control. If that upgrade has the tech trait, draw a card. And so I didn't originally think that was going to be of huge value, but I eventually added him to the deck because I ended up discovering that both spider claws especially, and organic webbing, probably organic webbing, the first one, but spider claws could be just as valuable. Readying those can make a huge difference. So we'll come back to those in a little bit, but yeah, so he ended up being a really great card to add to this deck. And then now we'll come to one important event that I want to get to right away, and that's Across the Spider-Verse. So this is the reason why very often I won't play, even though Peter Parker Spider-Man I consider to be the most valuable of all of the Web Warriors here, of the allies. Very often I don't have the resources available to play him necessarily, having all 3 of those ready. But Across the Spider-Verse will let me play him. So Across the Spider-Verse is a 2-cost event, max 1 per deck, has this hero action, exhaust a Web Warrior card you control. Again, Web of Life and Destiny is a Web Warrior card, so you can exhaust that card, which has no real impact on the game, no negative impact on the game. And so exhaust a Web Warrior card you control, search your deck pile for a Web Warrior ally and put it into play. Then choose a player. That player may spend 3 resources of any type to repeat this ability. I'm playing solo, so it's extremely rare for that second part to happen. But I typically, my target for this is almost always Spider-Man Peter Parker, at least if, he's the one that's in my discard pile. As long as we've already covered a couple of these events, let's go ahead and cover some more. So one way or another, 2 copies of that for some card draw. And I consider this to be one of the best decks for one way or another. I tend to like to have a copy of one way or another in a lot of my decks, 1 or 2. But I don't think they provide as much value as they do in this particular deck. So it has this hero action, 0 cost, hero action, search the encounter deck for a side scheme, reveal that side scheme, and draw 3 cards, right? So now you do have to actually reveal, notice it has a cost arrow, so you do actually have to reveal a side scheme in order to draw the 3 cards. So you want to make sure that you know ahead of time how many side schemes are in the deck and how many are in the discard pile, so that you can in fact draw the 3 cards, right? But why this is more valuable in this deck is for a number of reasons. So first of all, we want to be able to, once that side scheme comes out, we want to be able to defeat it, and clear the area can help with that. So it removes 2 threat from a scheme, and if this removes the last threat on that scheme, you can draw a card. So that alone won't do it, but in combination with Silk's own thwarting, notice that she starts off with just 1 thwart and 2 attack, and then 3 defense. Hit points of 10, hand size of 5 on her hero side, hand size of 6 on her alter ego side. And so she starts off with 1 thwart, but she won't end up with 1 thwart. So she'll be able to do plenty of thwarting herself. But in addition to that, we have a lot of other thwarting that occurs in this deck. She can do it herself with wall crawl as well. But in addition to that, we have, once we get the support, Jonah Jameson in play, he has this alter ego action that we don't care about as much. Like, there are times when I actually do focus on this a bit. I'll explain the difference here in a minute. So it has the alter ego action, exhaust this card, search your deck and discard pile for get the scoop and put it into play. So get the scoop is her own player side scheme, right? And so get the scoop has this alter ego action, exhaust your identity, remove 2 threat from here. Any player may trigger this ability. I've never once used that. But when it has 4 threat on it, by the way, and it's 0 cost. But when it's defeated, Sydney Moon player looks at the top 2 cards in the counter deck and tucks one of those cards under their identity. So I found that I never chose to go for this card when I was facing a villain that was particularly challenging. So, and I did face 2 villains that were highly challenging, and that was both Apocalypse and Magneto. So with my villain testing in this case, it was both in standard and expert against each one. I did Claw, Unis, and Unis in his own right can be challenging, but Silk actually handled him quite easily, or quite well, I should say. But then Apocalypse, highly challenging, and Magneto. So both of those are highly challenging villains, and there was just no way I was going to go for Get the Scoop. But I did find Get the Scoop valuable to go for in a deck where I had the board state under control a lot more. Then I would find that I would go for that. But generally speaking, I hardly ever played that card if it was a more challenging villain. Okay? So going back to J. Jonah Jameson, so what we really care about here is his action, exhaust this card, and remove 2 threat from a side scheme. So he can do that. It's just a regular action. So he can do that in either alter ego side or on the hero side, and he can do it every single turn. So that turned out to be a highly valuable card, and also made it very easy to clear those side schemes when you got them out with one way or another. Okay? All right. And then on top of that, when we would clear those side schemes, we also had Skilled Investigator as an upgrade in here. So if you cleared that side scheme, it's defeated, then you exhaust Skilled Investigator and you draw a card. Well, very often I would end up clearing it with Clear the Area, which would already remove 2 threat, remove the last threat from the scheme and draw a card, and then also Skilled Investigator, so I'd end up drawing 2 cards. And then on top of that, because we just defeated, right, so if we go now to look at Silk's ability on her hero side, she has, first of all, she has this limit. If there are more than 4 tucked cards here, discard all but 4 of those cards. In other words, anytime she has more than 4 cards, she has to discard back down to 4 cards. But she has her Silk Sense ability, which is this response: after you defeat a minion or side scheme, or resolve a treachery card, tuck that card under here from the encounter discard pile. So when she would defeat those side schemes that we were just now talking about, she would also get to tuck that card under her hero. Under her hero card. So that's the piece that made it even more valuable. So because, she has all kinds of ways to use those cards, including her swinging silk kicks that typically do, 3 cost attack event. It's aerial attack and superpower, deal 7 damage to an enemy, but you may discard a card tucked under Silk from the same encounter set as that enemy. So you can only do it if it's in the same encounter set as that enemy. If you do, this attack deals 2 additional damage and gains overkill. So that's part of where the value comes from. And it can also happen. I didn't use it as much for wall crawl. A lot of times with wall crawl, I just removed 2 threat from a scheme, or a lot of times I'd actually have clear the area in my hand and choose that instead. But there were times when I needed additional threat removal, then this would be a powerful card to play. So remove 2 threat, cost of 1, superpower and thwart. It's an event, right? Remove 2 threat from a scheme, choose a scheme. You may discard a card tucked under Silk from the same encounter set as the chosen scheme to remove 3 threat from that chosen scheme. So these cards end up being highly valuable under Silk. And I might as well mention right now, the other value it has is when she has her upgrade, Eidetic Memory. Well, actually, wow, it's going to be, I'll just mention those when I get to the upgrades, which will be pretty soon here. Okay. So why don't let's see, did we finish this up? Yeah, we finished up our events here. Let's go down to player side schemes. So these I added build support and superpower training. So build support is a 1 cost player side scheme, has 3 threat on it, and victory 0. When it's defeated, each player may search their deck and discard pile for support with a cost of 3 or less and put it into play. So my primary target was almost every time Jonah Jameson, to be able to remove 2 threat from a side scheme every single turn. At least, most of the time that was my primary target. But sometimes Albert Moon would be a higher priority. So he was my secondary target typically, or could be my highest priority depending upon the situation. And he is a 2 cost support, has this alter ego action, exhaust Albert Moon, and you can choose to tuck the top card of the encounter deck under Cindy Moon, which is definitely one of the values of the card, or heal 1 damage from Cindy Moon for each card tucked under her. So you have to balance which of those is most important at the time. And then I never used it for Web of Life and Destiny, because I expected, we could play Web of Life and Destiny for free, and we would get that card soon enough because of all the card draw in this deck. So from one way or another, the Nick Fury's not Professor X, the Nick Fury's Moon Girl, right? And then Skilled Investigator. So all of that card draw. Oh, and Clear the Area, right? So all that card draw there meant Web of Life and Destiny was going to get played soon enough, and it could be played for free once it came. Okay. So build support, really nice in this deck. And then superpower training. We have so many upgrades in here that are highly valuable. So really nice to get superpower training out. Typically, my highest priority for superpower training, if it wasn't in play, would be organic webbing. Oh, and by the way, there's a really great discussion of Silk, what would you call it? Strategy guide, I think he called it. I'm going to actually put this video as a link in my video description that was put out by Daring Lime. Just a brilliant video, I think. So I highly recommend it for just, learning how to play Silk in general, right? So this is mine is on this specific deck here, but in general, I highly recommend watching that video, and I'm going to actually put the link to that video in my video description. If you haven't seen it, I think you're going to want to see it. All right, let's continue on. All right. So what I was saying was for superpower training, my first priority would typically be organic webbing. So now, so this is a two cost upgrade, and it gives Silk +1 thwart. So now instead of 1 thwart, she has 2, and has this hero action: exhaust organic webbing and discard a card tucked under Silk. That then you can ready Silk. Then she gains the aerial trait until the end of the round. So that's where. That's another place. So this was just a really, like, I would say the first priority card. If it was already in play, then I might debate between which cards. I very often chose Spider Claws next as the card that as the next upgrade of hers. So when Silk makes a basic attack, exhaust Spider Claws, and then for this attack she gets +1 ATK for each card tucked under her from the same encounter set as the attacked enemy. This attack gains piercing. So the real value very often happened with the piercing, and especially against these latter two villains that I played, Apocalypse and Magneto. Having that piercing was extremely valuable. So Apocalypse, who I hadn't played at Apocalypse for a while, and discovered that not my favorite villain to play, a little bit more of a headache than I actually really wanted. But I'm really glad I happened to play Apocalypse again with Silk, because I got to see just how valuable these Spider Claws were in being able, because Apocalypse has a whole bunch of minions that come out who have tough on them. That's her. That's the prelate minions. So when a prelate comes out, there are these really tough minions, and every single one of them. Well, they're a high cost villain, a challenging minion, I should say, each one of them, and they all have tough on them, and you have to face, I think, 4 of them throughout the whole game. And so, so the Spider Claws proved incredibly invaluable going up against Apocalypse. So if you happen to like playing Apocalypse, I highly recommend trying Silk against Apocalypse for that reason. And this deck, I think, is particularly good for that. So I was really glad that I happened to play Apocalypse, even if I may not play Apocalypse much in the future. I did think that it was a great test of this deck. And then, of course, those of you who played Magneto enough know that Magneto gains toughs all the time. So it's really great being able to have piercing to get through those toughs as well. Right. So in addition to that, we have so other ones that could be a high priority might be spider reflexes. So if you end up focusing on defending with Silk, then when Silk defends, exhaust spider reflexes, and for this attack she gets +1 defense for each card tucked under her. But even more, or just as valuable, is that after this attack you can tuck the top card of the encounter discard pile under Silk. And so even though there are a lot of times you're not going to bother defending with her because you have plenty of allies out, a lot of times you can feel free to do so because you know that with your organic webbing, you're going to be able to ready her immediately thereafter. So that combination works really well. So there are times when I would choose to use the spider reflexes instead of maybe an ally to defend with. All right. So other than that, let me point out some of the other cards added. So a key card, in my opinion, in this is Under Surveillance. And so that's a 2-cost upgrade. Attach the main scheme, max 1 per scheme. Increase the target threat value of attached scheme by 4. So that makes it so that it's, especially if you have, the villain confused, you can very safely be able to go down to alter ego side. But a lot of times, even if the villain isn't confused, it would make it safe to go down to alter ego side. And counterintelligence. So counterintelligence to me is like a smaller version of Under Surveillance that's temporary, right? So it has this interrupt. When any amount of threat would be placed on the main scheme, discard counterintelligence and prevent 3 of that threat, excuse me. And but I found this, one of the things I like about this is these combined, or counterintelligence can serve as a placeholder that helps protect the main scheme until you get Under Surveillance out. And then you may or may not need counterintelligence. I did find a time, in fact, when I played against Expert Magneto, he ended up with 3 of those acceleration tokens because he was going through his deck so fast in this particular time. And so with those three acceleration tokens, I actually ended up playing counterintelligence a couple of times. That ended up, preventing him from being able to clear out even with under surveillance in play. So I found that highly valuable. Heroic intuition allows you to get even one more thwart on Silk, and so she can be a real powerhouse with regard to that. And already mentioned skilled investigator. All right, so a couple of other notes real quickly to finish off. So I note that that Silk was undefeated against all these villains. And so I felt really good about that because Apocalypse, Magneto was actually under control quite well with this deck. So I really enjoyed that kind of control that was had. And against Magneto in the final battle, ended up doing 32 points of damage in the final attack. But did final turn damage of 28, 30, and 32 points as examples. A couple of times, there were a few times it was more like in the low 20s, and a couple of times that were lower than that just because it wasn't necessary to have big attacks at the end in some of the plays. But you can definitely do some really nice spike damage in this deck. So what I'd like to finish off with is why that damage spikes up so nicely at the very end of the game when you're going to defeat the villain. So once you don't have to get all of your upgrades out to play this deck, right? You want to prioritize organic webbing, eventually the spider claws. You don't need them out right away, but eventually you want those out. You want, of course, the Web of Life and Destiny out, Jonah Jameson out. But once you get those key cards out, you'll eventually get Ingenuity out because of all the card draw. So once you get those key cards out and you start to get Swinging Silk Kick in your hand, you're going to want to start, going after that villain once you have the board state under control. And a lot of times I would find I would end up with a couple of minions out and I would just ignore them because I would go, ooh, I have a Swinging Silk Kick. Maybe I can just finish off the villain. And a lot of times that was the case once I had enough of these upgrades out. So here's how the game usually finished. Okay, so we would have organic webbing out and spider claws, and then we'd have some cards tucked under Silk. 2, 3, 4 cards. Usually by this time things are really rolling and you're getting a bunch of cards under her. So I would typically have 3 or 4 cards under Silk, and at least a couple of them would be the villain's encounter cards, which are key. Okay. All right. So what would happen is, so I would end up attacking with the spider. So most of these villains, right, if you look at the toughest villains, Apocalypse and Magneto, they would have their tufts on them. And so you would end up wanting to slice through those tufts with the spider claws, right? So you have your spider claws. When Silk makes a basic attack, exhaust spider claws. For this attack, she gets +1 ATK for each card tucked under her. From the same encounter set as the attacked enemy, this attack gains piercing. So she would pierce right through it. Okay. Then she would go ahead and ready with her organic webbing and get an attack again, just for a couple more points of damage. And then she'd usually, when she used her spider claws, right, she would get 1 or 2 or maybe 3 extra points of damage there. So she would do 3, 4, 5, 6. It's anywhere from 5 to 7 or 8 damage just from those attacks. And then she would also then attack with her Swinging Silk Kick, do 7 damage, then discard one of those encounter cards that are from the villain set, and actually add 2 more damage and do 2 more. So there's 9 damage. So just from one Swinging Silk Kick and then her own 2 attacks, we're talking about 9, 15, 16, 17 damage. Then if she has some allies out, 18, 19, 20, 21, right? If Spider-Man, Peter Parker is out, he attacks for a couple of points. Ready Silk, and she attacks for 2 more damage. If we had another Swinging Silk Kick out, then that's a potential another 7 to 9 damage. And that happened a lot, having 2 of those in hand, because a lot of time this final attack was set up by Silk when she was in her alter ego side, which we haven't talked about yet. And that alter ego side is critical because she has this action. Discard a card tucked here, draw 2 cards. So now she has, right, she starts off with a hand size of 6 at the beginning of the turn. Now she has 8. And maybe she didn't quite have the right card in hand, so she played Moon Girl, Nick Fury, and added a few more cards to her hand and got the right cards and ended up with, two swinging silk kicks in her hand. So that happened a lot, which is why the damage would spike anywhere from, like I said, on the low end in the low 20s, all the way up to around 30. So the ending of the game was pretty similar every time, because those spider claws just set things up so nicely, along with the organic webbing, and then finishing things off with the swinging silk kicks, which would then also take advantage of the cards that are under her hero card because of the silk sense ability. All right, so that's it for this one. If you enjoy this kind of content, please like and subscribe. Also, please comment. I love having conversations with people in the comments. Have a good one, everybody.